This video is inspired by Jimmy Highrollers NBA GOAT Pyramid, in which he ranks the top 30 NBA players in history into 5 different tiers. What makes this specific method of organising greatness a bit more practical than other methods is that rather than listing each person one after another, it allows you to create tiers or levels to greatness. So for example, if 2 wrestlers were extremely close in greatness and you can't decide on who should be higher all time, you can simply put them in the same tier. Is Shawn Michaels greater than Bret Hart? Or is Bret Hart greater than Shawn Michaels? Well, that depends on who you ask, but they certainly do belong in the same tier of greatness. So today I'm going to be creating the WWE GOAT Pyramid, where I rank the greatest WWE superstars of all time. So how will I rank these wrestlers in terms of greatness? Well, here's my formula. Number 1, peak over longevity. Kane has been wrestling in WWE for over 20 years with many peaks and valleys in his career. Whereas a guy like The Rock only wrestled in the company full time for a 7-year run, but was on fire for the vast majority of that period. So in this case, I would rank The Rock's greatness in a tier above Kane's. Number 2, spots are limited to the very best. Much like the aforementioned NBA GOAT Pyramid, I too will be limiting this to only 30 spots. For example, I'm sure there will be wrestlers that I have not added to the list that many will be wondering why I have not included. Well, in order to add them on, I would have to subtract another wrestler, and unfortunately the cutoff had to be made at some point, so again I've kept it strictly to the top 30 all time. Number 3, I've tried to be as objective as possible. This list won't necessarily reflect my own personal opinions on these wrestlers, and I've tried my best to rank them subjectively on a collection of in-ring ability, mic skills, star power, impact on the business and all other variables combined. And finally, this is strictly an all-time WWE list. No other companies have been taken into consideration here. For example, Sting hasn't made it onto the top 30, and although Ric Flair has made it onto the list, only his work in WWE has been taken into consideration. So now that we've broken down the formula, let's get into this pyramid. Starting with tier 5, we have Daniel Bryan. Widely regarded as one of the greatest in-ring performers of all time, he's had great runs as both a babyface and a heel. He's awesome on the mic, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him move up a tier or maybe even 2 by the time he ends his WWE career. Next up we have Owen Hart. Widely regarded as arguably the greatest wrestler the company ever had to not win a world championship, the 1994 King of the Ring was awesome on the mic, awesome in the ring, and displayed the ability to evolve his character throughout his WWE career, from the King of Hearts all the way to the Black Heart in the Nation of Domination, as well as everything he did in between. Rowdy Roddy Piper. Piper is another candidate for possibly the greatest WWE wrestler of all time to never win a world championship in the company, and he is arguably the greatest talker in the history of the business. Mick Foley. In some ways, Mick Foley was the 5th Beatle of the WWF Attitude Era, being in rivalries with Kane, The Undertaker, The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin, all at the company's very peak in the late 90s, and at the time would also help create stars out of younger talent like Triple H, not to mention his 1998 Hell in a Cell match with The Undertaker, which features arguably the most iconic moment in the history of WWE when he was thrown off the top of the Hell in a Cell. Edge. One of the most decorated wrestlers in the history of the company, Edge has had 31 different title reigns in WWE, including 11 runs with the world title. Now at one point I had Edge in tier 4, however, he never really was the face of the company. Most of those world championship runs came on SmackDown, which was the B show at the time, and I just couldn't find anyone on tier 4 to take off and replace with Edge, so here he is on tier 5, still one of the top 30 superstars in the history of the company. Kane. Kane has without a doubt one of the greatest gimmicks the company has ever created, and has showed a great ability to evolve that character from his 1997 debut to his unmasking in 2003 and all his different incarnations ever since. Kane has held multiple world championships in the company, including a one-day run where he won the title at the aforementioned King of the Ring 1998 pay-per-view, and then would go on to win the world championship on SmackDown a decade later. AJ Styles. Although AJ Styles has only been with the company for 4 years, he's already broke into the top 30 WWE superstars of all time and has been placed on tier 5 as he has had some of the greatest matches of all time, including his iconic SummerSlam bout with John Cena, as well as having one of the longest WWE Championship reigns in modern history. Andre the Giant. Now I'm sure this one's going to hold a little bit of controversy. I know a lot of people would have Andre the Giant possibly ranked 1 or 2 tiers higher than tier 5. However, I've always felt that WWE have somewhat overestimated his impact on the history of the company. WWE do like to revise their own history to suit their own narrative, and although Andre the Giant did have a great career, the majority of his prime came before he ever even entered WWE. However, much like Mick Foley, Andre holds one of the most iconic moments in WWE history when he faced off with Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania 3. Batista. Batista has done it all in WWE, from winning multiple world championships to main eventing multiple WrestleManias. He was never the greatest in-ring worker, but he did have a lot of star power and was very good on the mic, as well as obviously having a great look. And rounding off tier 5 we have Diesel. Now a lot of people may be surprised to see Diesel here on the list of the top 30 WWE superstars of all time. However, at one point he was the face of the company, with a major world championship push as well as main eventing WrestleMania. And whenever you go back and watch anything from the WWF's New Generation era, Big Daddy Cool is always front and centre, so I do believe he belongs on tier 5. Now let's get into the next tier of WWE all-time greats, tier 4. This tier tends to be people that have had multiple runs with the World Championship, have had multiple WrestleMania main events, and in some cases were even the faces of the company in certain points in time, while having a combination of being great in the ring and or on the mic, and are generally considered to be a tier above the tier 5 wrestlers when all things are considered throughout the annals of wrestling history. So let's kick this tier off with none other than the Game Triple H. Triple H of course has had multiple runs with the WWE Championship, he's had multiple main events in WrestleMania, he's been part of one of the greatest factions of all time in the Generation X. However, arguably his biggest impact on the business hasn't been his in-ring career, but it is now what he is doing out of the ring with regards to what he has done with the NXT brand, creating a whole new generation of WWE superstars. Roman Reigns. Now Roman Reigns has been the face of the WWE over the past half decade or so, main eventing 4 consecutive WrestleManias. Roman of course is also part of one of the greatest factions in WWE history, that being the Shield, and I must say that the slander has got to stop on this man. He is a great in-ring wrestler, one of the best big men the WWE have had in a long time. He is very good in the ring, especially for his size. He is much improved on the mic, he has a spectacular look, he really has earned his place atop of the WWE, and again I wouldn't be surprised to see him move up a tier or maybe even 2 by the time it's all said and done. CM Punk. CM Punk is one of the most beloved superstars in WWE history, a multiple time world championship including one of the longest reigns in modern history. He's great in the ring and also great on the mic, as can be seen in his famous pipe bomb promo, which is regarded as one of the greatest of all time. The only real thing missing off his resume is a WrestleMania main event. However, I wouldn't be surprised to see him make a return to the WWE one day and finally get that main event under his belt. Chris Jericho. Now of course Chris Jericho is the current AEW World Heavyweight Champion. and he's wrestled all over the world, from Mexico to Japan. He was in ECW as well as WCW back in the day, but the longest run of his career was by far his time in the WWE, and this is where he really made a name for himself as a true main event caliber wrestler. He's a multiple time world champion, he's main evented WrestleMania, he's had some of the greatest rivalries in the history of the company. Many people are now going so far as to call him the greatest wrestler of all time, and he is of course a surefire WWE Hall of Famer somewhere down the line. The Ultimate Warrior. Now, as I stated in the criteria at the beginning of the video, I'm going to be placing an importance for peak over longevity of career, and this is why I have the Ultimate Warrior in tier 4. Although he didn't have a very long run in the WWE, at his very peak he was absolutely white hot, reaching almost Hulkamania type levels. That would ultimately reach its climax in the main event of WrestleMania 6, where he had one of the most iconic matches in WWE history, defeating Hulk Hogan to become the first ever double champion in WWF history, holding the Intercontinental and World Championship at the same time. Eddie Guerrero. Much like other wrestlers on this tier, Eddie Guerrero is considered by many to be the greatest wrestler of all time, one of the best in-ring technicians you'll ever see, as well as having a very entertaining gimmick. And what puts Eddie a tier above the likes of AJ Styles and Roddy Piper is his run in 2004, as I stated, with the Warrior, and putting quite a bit of emphasis on the wrestler's peak. And in 04, Eddie Guerrero was white hot. He reached a level of fan love that very few wrestlers have ever reached in the history of professional wrestling. Eddie Guerrero was so beloved during that era in particular that I feel like I've got to place him in tier 4. Kurt Angle. Arguably the greatest athlete in the history of the WWE, Kurt Angle is one of the greatest all-round performers in the history of the business. He had the unique ability to make you laugh but also take him serious at the same time, as well as putting on some of the greatest matches of all time, in particular during the SmackDown 6 era in the mid-2000s. I feel like the only thing preventing Kurt from being a tier higher here is the fact that he wrestled the majority of his career in Impact Wrestling. However, as short as it may have been, Kurt Angle's time in WWE certainly puts him on the top 30 list of all time. Randy Orton. There has arguably never been a more natural fit for the wrestling business than Randy Orton. Everything he does is so smooth. He's a natural heel, but he can also play the babyface very well. He has won multiple world championships, main evented multiple WrestleManias, won Royal Rumbles, Money in the Bank ladder matches. He has done everything and anything there can be done in the WWE, and has been doing it for almost 20 years now non-stop. Next up are our tier 3 wrestlers, guys that are generally considered to be a step above tier 4 when all things are considered, from in-ring ability to mic skills to star power, and all of the other little variables in between. So let's start the tier off with Bob Backlund. Now, a lot of people may be surprised to see Bob Backlund ranked so high. However, Backlund was the face of the company for a very long time, holding on to the World Championship for a combined 2,135 days, which is almost 6 years in total, and he was the man to bridge the gap throughout the decade of the 70s between Bruno Sammartino's dominant era in the 60s and Hulk Hogan's dominant run in the 80s going into the 90s. Randy Savage. One of the most beloved WWE superstars of all time. I feel like Randy Savage is a slight cut above the people of tier 4 that he shares a lot of similarities with. For example, I see a lot of Randy Savage in CM Punk, however I just feel that Randy Savage has always had that extra it factor that can't quite be put into words. He had what is regarded to be the greatest wrestling match of all time at WrestleMania 3 with Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. He is of course regarded to be one of the greatest, if not the greatest, on the mic in the history of the WWE. And again, when you watch him, he just has something that can't quite be put into words, and something that no one else has ever had in the history of professional wrestling, something that is uniquely Randy Savage. Brock Lesnar. Much like I said with Roman Reigns, the slander has got to stop with this man as well. Brock Lesnar is without a doubt the best heel of this generation. People go out of their way to tune in to watch Brock Lesnar get beat. People buy tickets to go to events to watch Brock Lesnar get beat. He is the biggest draw in the wrestling business today, and what is very interesting to note is that John Cena has recently went on record as to saying that Brock Lesnar is the best wrestler he has ever been in the ring with, and he believes him to be the greatest of all time. Now, no matter what anyone's opinions are on John Cena, he knows a lot about the wrestling business, and I put his opinion in high regards. Lesnar's legitimacy as a former UFC heavyweight champion allows him to bring something to the WWE that no one else has ever been able to offer. And as I've said with a few other wrestlers here on the list, he holds arguably the most iconic moment in the history of the company when he defeated The Undertaker's WrestleMania undefeated streak at WrestleMania 30, which I feel is the most memorable moment in his career. Bret Hart. The excellence of execution was without a doubt the face of his era of wrestling, and was a very vital part in bringing an international audience to the company. I don't know if it was because he was Canadian or for whatever other reason it may have been, but people loved Bret Hart all over the world, from India to Europe and everywhere else. If you go back and watch footage of Bret wrestling abroad, the fans' reaction to him was wild. It was like when Elvis Presley walked on stage. And in my personal opinion, Bret Hart is the greatest in-ring wrestler of all time. He could tell a story with anyone, all the way from a 7-footer like Diesel to our next wrestler on tier 3, Shawn Michaels. Now, much like Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels is without a doubt one of the greatest, if not the greatest, in-ring wrestler of all time, and the only thing that stopped me placing Shawn a tier higher here is the fact that he was never really the face of the company throughout any of his runs in WWE. And to round up tier 3 we have Ric Flair. Now, I don't have to justify why I've got Ric Flair as one of the all-time greats here. If anything, I have to justify why he's not higher on the list, and that's because I am not taking into consideration any of his work outside WWE, which to be fair was his best years. However, Ric Flair did have 2 great runs with the company, and I feel like he belongs on the exact same tier as Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart, the 3 of them all very comparable to each other. Now let's take a look at tier 2. These are all guys that could easily be put on the Mount Rushmore of WWE. They've all been guys that have been the face of the company and have represented the company for a number of years, and you could make the argument that they are the best of their time. So let's start out the list with none other than The Undertaker. The Undertaker has without a doubt the greatest gimmick in the history of the WWE. No one can even compare to him. You could make the argument that The Undertaker should be tier 1, however once again, like other wrestlers here on the list, he has never quite been the top guy at any one specific given moment in time, even though he has always been the locker room leader behind the scenes. But of course, The Undertaker has always been the ultimate attraction for WWE, and there has never been anyone greater to do it than him. The Rock. Again, another person you could easily make the case to be tier 1 here, but the reason I've got Rocky in tier 2 is because he was never quite the number 1 guy in the company at the time he was on top. Bruno Sammartino. Now, here on the other hand is a guy who was fully the face of the company for a long time, longer than anyone in the history of the WWE. Bruno Sammartino single-handedly carried the WWE throughout the 1960s, and is the longest reigning heavyweight champion in the history of the company, spanning over 7 years at 2,803 days. And rounding out tier 2 we have John Cena. John Cena, another person that could be easily considered to be put on the Mount Rushmore of the WWE. One of only a handful of people that can truly say they were the number 1 guy of an entire generation. And not only that, but John Cena, much like The Rock, has broke through into the mainstream, and at this point is pretty much a household name, and he may very well go down as the last true face of the company, as it seems that WWE are now kind of sharing the load amongst wrestlers. They're not necessarily going with a number 1 guy the way they once did. So that rounds out tier number 2, all guys that could easily be considered as the GOAT, all guys that could easily be considered as being put on the Mount Rushmore of WWE, but for one reason or another I just couldn't put them in tier 1. So let's look and see who we have at the top of the mountain. Hulk Hogan. Now, as great as everyone else on this pyramid were, nobody could compare to the Hulkster himself. At his peak, Hulk Hogan was white hot. He is the Michael Jordan of professional wrestling. Not even The Rock, John Cena, The Undertaker, nobody can touch Hulk Hogan at his very peak in the 1980s. And I feel like it's almost an impossible feat to ever expect anyone to reach the heights of Hulkamania. However, we have one more wrestler here on the list that shares tier 1 with Hulk Hogan. Stone Cold Steve Austin. That's right guys, as much as Hulkamania was the peak of professional wrestling in the 1980s, I personally have never seen anyone as white hot in the wrestling business as Stone Cold Steve Austin was in the late 90s. The Attitude Era and the WWF's Golden Era are the two most beloved eras in the history of the company, and both Hogan and Stone Cold were at the very top of those eras. And as much as a guy like The Rock was beloved by the audience, he never quite got those pops that Stone Cold got from the fans. And as I said before, WWE love to rewrite their own history, and I feel like they tend to overestimate the impact that the Generation X and The Rock had on the Attitude Era's success. Not that they didn't play a huge part in it, but if you were there at the time, you know fine well there was one man that the entire company revolved around, the entire sport revolved around. It was Stone Cold Steve Austin at number 1 with a bullet. Again, I personally have never experienced anybody as white hot as Stone Cold was in 1998 and 1999. He's my personal favourite wrestler of all time, but I do believe I am being objective here when I place him at the top of the list, alongside the Hulkster. So yeah guys, that is my official WWE GOAT pyramid. Again, I feel like I have been as objective as I possibly can here. For example, Owen Hart is my personal second favourite wrestler of all time, but I did put my own feelings aside and placed him on the bottom tier quite fairly, I believe. Have I missed anyone on the list? Are there any glaring omissions? Also, let me know what you think of the tiers. Is there anyone that should be higher? Is there anyone that should be lower? I'd love to hear what you guys think of this. I spent quite a bit of time putting this all together. Also, if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the channel with post notifications turned on to keep updated on future videos here on the channel. Make sure to follow Wrestle with Andy on Instagram and Twitter for more updates over there. Thanks for watching guys, it is much appreciated, and I will see you in the next one.